Marriage ends. After heartbreaking loss but an unexpected $10 million inheritance transforms Eve. Eve Thompson's world shattered when her husband Jacob, a gentle mechanic with a warm heart, was suddenly taken from her in a car accident. The shock left her gasping for air in a life filled with solitude. Each morning, the echo of laughter that once spilled through their kitchen now haunted her, the walls whispering bittersweet memories that only deepened the chasm of loss. In the small town of Columbus Grove, Ohio, condolences poured in. Yet they felt like hollow gestures. Friends would smile sympathetically, but every greeting felt like a reminder of her loneliness. A loneliness that clawed at her, a gnawing ache in her chest. Days turned into weeks, and with each sunrise, the weight of her sorrow grew heavier. Jacob's tools remained untouched in the garage, a testament to the life they had built around shared dreams. Those dreams had crumbled without warning, leaving Eve with unshed tears and a heart that throbbed with anguish. She wore her grief like a shroud, the vibrant hues of her once cheerful existence dulled to dark shades of uncertainty. Then, in a twist of fate that felt surreal, a letter arrived one fateful afternoon. Eve's hands shook as she read the words, "You have inherited $10 million from your grandmother, Margaret Matthews." In that moment, the weight of her sorrow battled against the intoxicating allure of freedom. The money promised an escape, a way to leave behind the shadows of grief that seemed to suffocate her. Could she really pack up and flee to a world where memories of Jacob wouldn't choke her? The thought fluttered through her mind, a glimpse of possibility, but it was quickly engulfed by guilt. How could she use newfound wealth to run from the love and laughter they had shared? More than just a moral dilemma, it felt like a betrayal of Jacob's spirit. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Unease coiled in her stomach as Eve ventured into her grandmother's old estate. Dust motes danced in the sunlight filtering through the attic window when she stumbled upon stacks of letters and art supplies tucked away beneath faded blankets. Each letter unveiled her grandmother's struggles, her passion for painting, and unfulfilled dreams. Eve felt a fire ignite within her, a connection to the woman she'd never known, yet who shared similar pain and dreams of expression. As she picked up a paintbrush, the initial stroke felt like a lifeline, a channel for her anguish. But just as creativity flourished, so did self-doubt. What right did she have to delve into art when the pain of her loss dragged her beneath the surface? The local art scene buzzed with excitement and critique, yet skepticism hung heavily in the air. With every brushstroke, Eve battled whispers that her talent was merely a product of her inheritance, a privilege wrapped in a legacy she hadn't earned. Tension escalated within her and her husband's family, who began to question her motives, viewing her growth with suspicion rather than support. As their scrutiny deepened, she felt cornered, torn between a life that held on to her late husband's memory and one that beckoned her toward a fresh start. Just before her first gallery showing, a moment that felt both thrilling and terrifying, an ominous call came from Jacob's family, threatening her hard-won space in the art world. Doubt clawed at her as she stood before her artworks, each one a reflection of her grief and hope. Would she truly be able to claim this life, or would the weight of her past suffocate her ambitions? As she looked around the room filled with her heart's expressions, an overpowering sense of uncertainty enveloped her. The canvas of her future brushed with both despair and hope felt impossibly vast, and the unyielding pressures of love, loss, and a burgeoning identity threatened to suffocate her before she could even begin. With a deep breath, Eve closed her eyes, trying to quiet the storm inside her. The cacophony of doubt and desperation raged, but there was a flicker of something else, a faint glimmer of determination. She recalled her grandmother's letters, inked with vulnerability and dreams unfulfilled. They spoke of a woman who had fought against the restraints of her time, whose art spoke volumes even in silence. Eve felt a kindred spirit. Her grandmother had battled her own demons, using paint as her refuge. This connection ignited something in Eve, a recognition that perhaps she could also carve a path forward, one brushstroke at a time. Consequently, instead of succumbing to despair, she decided to channel her turmoil into her art. Each piece became a representation of her journey. The hues of deep blues and grays symbolized loss, while splashes of vibrant yellows and greens mirrored her longing for renewal. She embraced the chaos of her emotions, finding solace in creativity. Yet, as the gallery show approached, she couldn't escape a corrosive sense of judgment. Her husband's family, having claimed a right to her grief, remained a tempest looming in the backdrop. The anticipation of their scrutiny struck her with paralyzing fear. Would they see her as an imposter? A widow sullied by wealth, crafting a false identity from the ashes of loss? The days passed quickly, and with them the pressure mounted. Friends encouraged her to focus on the positive, to showcase her talent and celebrate new beginnings. But the words felt distant, as if spoken from an unreachable realm. She sought refuge in the solitude of her studio, painting until her fingertips ached. The brush became an extension of herself, a conduit for expressing feelings far too complex for mere words. The art flourished, but so did the uncertainty of her worth and place in this new life. On the eve of her gallery opening, sleep eluded her, as anxiety clawed at the edges of her consciousness. She rehearsed her speech over and over, each repetition amplifying the voice inside her that shouted she was a fraud. In a moment of desperation, she picked up her phone and called her old friend Clara, a seasoned artist who had been a source of unwavering support. "Eve, you're not a fraud. You've created from a place of raw emotion, and that's where true art lives," Clara reassured, her voice grounding Eve in the moment. "Remember, it's okay to feel vulnerable, but don't let that vulnerability define you. Claim your space, your voice. You deserve it." The calm sagacity in Clara's words ignited courage in Eve, shoving aside the gnawing doubts. As she hung up, she finally allowed herself to feel anticipation surging within her. Despite the impending confrontation, she was more than an artist. She was a woman reclaiming her life. The abstract swirl on canvas symbolized her complexity. It was not merely a product of her inheritance, but her truth, tangled, vibrant, and alive. Finally, the night of the gallery came. As she stepped into the venue, the air thickened with both excitement and dread. Lights twinkled, and the chatter of guests filled her senses, yet the familiar fear lingered. And then, behind the crowd, she spotted Jacob's family. Tension became palpable, the weight of their judgment threatening to crush her newfound freedom. She tightened her grip on the edges of her portfolio, her heart thumping wildly. The moment stretched out, as if time conspired against her. Would she find strength in vulnerability, or would the past control her future? With every second ticking away, Eve faced the defining question: who would she be in this crowded room? Eve inhaled deeply, ready to embrace the next stroke of her canvas. The decision lay before her. Will she stand and combat the doubts, or will she retreat into the shadows? The pulse of her heart beat louder with each passing moment, marking the beginning of her most pivotal confrontation yet. Eve's perspective altered sharply as she crossed the threshold into the gallery. The vibrant colors of her paintings danced off the walls, but the alluring beauty of her art seemed dependent on the shadows that accompanied her. The cacophony of voices flooded her ears, yet she felt utterly detached, as if she had stepped into someone else's reality. An onlooker turned, eyes skimming over her as though she were a mere object, not the architect of the chaos unfolding on canvas. One painting caught the attention of a couple nearby. Their admiration formed an invisible line between Eve and them. She was both thrilled and repulsed by the prospect of being seen as an artist rather than as Jacob's widow. Did they appreciate the depth behind her work, or were they merely enamored by the strokes of brilliance? With a pounding heart, she took a deep breath, forcing herself to look away from their appraisal. In her mind, flashes of doubt crowded her thoughts. She challenged herself. Was her art not authentic enough? Could they sense her desperation, her longing to escape the confines of her grief? The paintings, each a visceral reflection of her psyche, suddenly felt like an interrogation. She had poured her heart onto the canvas, yet the lingering voices of her husband's family whispered taunts in her consciousness. They would dismiss her. She could sense it. Scanning the room, she spotted the familiar figures of Jacob's family, encased in a bubble of their own aloofness. Their disapproval was palpable, a heavy atmosphere around them that seemed to emanate disdain. The urge to tether herself to her art, to bathe in its color and complexity, heightened. Eve clenched her fists, battling the urge to flee. Then Clara appeared, breaking through the crowd, a beacon of support amidst the uncertainty. The warmth in her smile seemed to cast away some of the darkness invading Eve's mind. "You're here now. Remember why you fought to get here." Clara's words rippled through her, reminding her of their recent conversation. In this moment, Eve could choose to walk towards the light or dissolve into the background. Eve turned her focus inward, reflecting on the struggle encapsulated in each brushstroke. They told tales not just of loss, but of resilience. Each piece bore witness to the alchemy of pain, transformed into beauty. She possessed the power to evoke emotions, daring anyone to judge her so superficially. This pivotal night was not just about showcasing her art. It was an invitation for others to peer into her past, to experience her truth unfettered by grief's weight. Then came the moment she dreaded. Jacob's mother approached with an air of calculated grace. "Eve, it's commendable what you've done here," she began, but Eve could hear the weight of disapproval lurking behind her words. "However, I hope this isn't a misguided attempt to profit from what you went through." The words sliced through Eve, an attempt to belittle her journey in art. For a heartbeat, the room lowered its volume, the anticipation swirling as she inhaled deeply, steadying herself. Could she truly confront this judgment? With newfound clarity, Eve saw the contrast, a woman standing on the brink of defeat and one ready to erase boundaries between her past and present. It was time to redefine herself, to push against the limits imposed by Jacob's family. "This isn't just a display of art, it's my reclamation of self. This too belongs to me," she replied, standing tall, her voice unwavering. In that moment, she recognized her worth as an artist and as a woman, a powerful force shunning the shadows. But as she spoke, she recalled the implications of her inheritance, entangled with guilt and expectation. The weight of it all could not be ignored. Where would this newfound resolve lead her? What would she discover about her future, her identity, conflicts lingering just beneath the surface? Eve's heart raced, knowing the confrontation had merely begun. The real journey awaited. Would her creative journey unravel deeper truths, or would old fears resurface? Eve stepped away from Jacob's mother, the pulse of the gallery thrumming in her ears. The encounter felt like a moment frozen in time. She could still taste the bitterness of judgment on her tongue. Each painting she had worked tirelessly to create now felt heavy, laden with the expectations of a family that felt foreign to her, as if the vibrant colors had dulled under the weight of their perception. Yet as she turned her back to the negativity, a flicker of something profoundly transformative surged within her. Courage, perhaps. The shadows that had clung to her were now being challenged by the brilliance of self-assertion. Clara's persistent gazes and understanding nods served as a lifeline, rekindling the bedrock on which Eve had begun to rebuild her identity post-tragedy. A sudden clarity unfolded before her. The gallery was not a prison, nor a spectacle for judgment. It was a sanctuary, a testament to her survival, and a canvas where she was both the artist and the connoisseur of her renewed life. Could she, would she, surrender to fear? No. This moment called for action. Each brushstroke was a declaration. The rawness of her emotions could resonate with an audience that felt loss, and that could inspire a shift in her narrative. Inspiration surged as she moved through the gallery, her fingers grazing the frames of her work. She admired the growth present in the brushstrokes, each edge a reminder of heartache and healing, of resilience forged in the crucible of grief. People buzzed around her. The ambiance shifted from something suffocating to a source of palpable energy. With each step, her resolve crystallized. It was time to engage, to weave herself into the fabric of this moment instead of remaining an isolated thread. Suddenly, Eve spotted a small group of aspiring artists a few feet away, animatedly discussing her work. She inched closer, drawn by the magnetic pull of their enthusiasm. Their viewpoints intrigued her, They approached her paintings with the same reverence with which she held them. A young man gestured broadly, expressing how her use of color transcended mere aesthetics, diving into the emotional depths of the human experience. Another, older artist reflected on the juxtaposition of darkness and light, interpreting her work as a journey through anguish that ultimately found hope. Eve's heart raced, not from fear but from an exhilarating sense of connection. Without thinking, she found herself moving into the circle. "I'm so glad my work resonates with you," she said, her voice steady amid her amplified pulse. The group turned, eyes wide with surprise before lighting up at the opportunity for dialogue. "You're the artist?" asked a woman, her expression oscillating between astonished and awed. "Yes," Eve replied, her voice growing stronger. "I think each piece speaks to the complexity of handling loss, the notion of reclaiming joy and not being limited by any past obligation." Gradually, Eve began to share her story. Not solely about Jacob or her grief, but about her ongoing journey through solitude, passion, and self-discovery. The narrating transformed her from a mere observer to the embodiment of the experience she hoped to convey. The reactions were ambrosial, a gust of fresh air that breathed life into her. After a while, Clara sidled up to her, eyes sparkling. "Eve, look at you. You're living in your paintings not just as the artist, but as the woman reclaiming herself. This is profound." Encouraged, Eve's thoughts drifted. She was no longer shackled by her past. Rather, she was challenging herself to grow, to forge relationships with those who would truly see her art without the veil of judgment. Yet the specter of Jacob's family still loomed. Their expectations lingered like a shrouded ghost threatening to crash her newfound confidence. As the evening progressed, she caught whispers of artistic opportunities presented by patrons interested in her story. This could potentially launch her career, perhaps sidestepping the inheritance dilemma that seemed insurmountable. But what would she choose if she were given everything her heart desired? Was she ready to let go of her past entirely and pursue an unencumbered future? In that whirlpool of potential, Eve stood at a profound crossroads of choice and consequence. She could either embrace the opportunity to grow or remain stagnant under familial pressures. Each moment breathed urgency into her decision-making process, a test of her commitment to authentically live. With a deep breath, she pushed through the crowd, determined to explore how far this new path could take her. But looming questions hung in the air like brushstrokes waiting to be applied. Would she risk everything, or would the shadows of her past ensnare her once more? Eve navigated through the crowded gallery, her heart still pulsing with the energy of authentic connection she had just experienced. But as she stepped away from the small group of artists, the weight of Jacob's family's expectations settled like an unwelcome shroud over her renewed purpose. She could feel their judgment looming, a reminder of the obligation that had threatened to stifle her. The gallery's vibrancy began to dim for her as the dilemma swirled within. She found a quiet corner, leaning against the cool marble of the wall, and allowed herself a moment of contemplation. Clara's words echoed in her mind. "You're living in your paintings." If only it were that easy to live freely in her life as well. The juxtaposition felt immense. The prospect of her artistic career expanding against the stringent constraints imposed by a family she had only recently started to understand. She realized she was at a pivotal juncture, not merely as an artist, but as a woman untethering herself from emotional chains. Determined to reclaim control over her life, she observed the other artists around her, their laughter and eagerness contagious. What would happen if she stepped further into this realm of creativity, embracing not just her past, but her potential as well? If she were to follow this dream, she would have to ignite her ambition and let go of fear, a leap into uncertainty that could lead to a vibrant professional future unfettered by her past. "Eve!" Clara beckoned, her face aglow with excitement. "The patrons want to speak with you again." Eve felt a rush of adrenaline. This was her chance, a potential launch into the art world that had once seemed like a distant dream. "What do I have to lose?" she murmured under her breath. As she followed Clara back into the throng, a storm of courage swelled within her. The second wave of conversations unfurled in her presence, richer and more dynamic than the first. Each inquiry was an invitation to share her journey, and with every word exchanged, she felt her confidence solidify. "Your work feels alive," a patron remarked, half in disbelief. "What's your story?" Her breath hitched at the intimate ask. This was no longer about art simply reflecting grief. It was about her narrative evolving in tandem. "I've learned to channel my experiences into these paintings," she began, her voice steady. "It's not just about loss. It's about reclaiming life amid the shadows." With each vivid articulation of her transformation, she saw an appreciative shift in the patrons' expressions. They leaned in closer, their intentions clear. Here was an artist in the making, someone with stories to tell. Eve started to believe her own capabilities. She began to visualize her trajectory fueled by this unexpected support. In that moment, she discovered a reservoir of hidden talents within her, an ability to inspire, to evoke emotion, to turn pain into a canvas of hope. This artistic connection wouldn't merely define her future career, it could reshape her identity. But even as she gripped her newfound momentum, Jacob's family lurked at the outer edges of her consciousness, ready to destabilize her resolve. She felt a tug at her heart, a reminder that while she was stepping forward, she was still tethered to her past. Ever so subtly, the prospect of familial reconciliation began to creep into her thoughts. Would embracing her artistic growth mean severing ties completely? Could she stand firm in her conviction without estranging those she once held dear? A sense of urgency crystallized in her resolve. She needed to confront this shadow of her past, if she were ever to fully embrace the growth that lay ahead. The stakes were rising. Would she confront her late husband's family, or allow their lingering judgments to overshadow her burgeoning identity? With each conversation, the question loomed larger. The next step was more than just an artistic endeavor. It could become an act of defiance that would carve out her own narrative at the expense of familial bonds. Eve took a deep breath, standing firm amongst the chaotic energy of the evening. What would she choose? It was not just art that beckoned her. It was a path toward an authentic life where she could finally thrive. Gathering her courage, she made her way toward the entrance, determined to step outside and claim an unfiltered moment. But as she reached for the door, a familiar figure caught her eye. Jacob's mother, poised and observing. The moment of confrontation had arrived. The air felt charged, a silent acknowledgement that the moment Eve had both dreaded and anticipated was here, inescapable. Jacob's mother stood with the same poise that had once intimidated Eve. Her presence seemed both a challenge and an anchor. Memories of resentful holidays and awkward conversations swirled. But now Eve was armed with something more potent than reluctance: clarity. "Eve." Jacob's mother spoke with a measured calm, yet the tremor of emotion betrayed her facade. "You're doing well, I see." The comment felt pointed, a reminder of the familial expectations that had favored traditional pathways over artistic dreams. Eve steeled herself, heart pounding fiercely as she found her voice. "Thank you. I've been working hard to find my own way." "Your own way," she echoed softly, almost as if considering the phrase for the first time. "And what if that way leads you further from us?" The question pierced through Eve's defenses like a knife. What if it did? The notion had hovered in her thoughts, haunting yet liberating. Perhaps I need to explore what I want, regardless of what others expect of me. The sudden challenge surprised even her. It was as if she had stepped from the shadows into a light she had long shunned. An array of emotions flitted across Jacob's mother's face: regret, empathy, and perhaps understanding. "You must understand, Eve," Jacob's mother continued, her voice laced with an intensity that demanded attention. "This family has a legacy, and it was meant for you, for us. Your choice could cast a shadow on all that we have built." Eve met her gaze unflinching. "But what have we built if I am not happy within it? If my choices don't honor my true self?" The gallery's noise faded into a hushed backdrop, leaving only their dialogue ringing out. A confrontation underscoring a deeper, personal confrontation within Eve. For years she had feared judgment, and yet in this exchange, she felt a shift, a determination that pulled her forward. "Art is my truth. It centers me. I cannot abandon it simply because it diverges from what you or the family envisioned." The silence stretched, and tension hung palpably in the air. Jacob's mother seemed to measure her words carefully. And if your art fails, if your pursuits lead to nothing more than struggles and heartache? Eve took a steadying breath. Then at least those struggles will be mine. I'll own them. The risk is part of the journey. I refuse to live someone else's dream. The boldness of her conviction surprised even her. It wasn't simply about the art. It was about dismantling the remnants of a life dictated by others' expectations. As Jacob's mother averted her gaze, emotions coursed through Eve like a rushing river. Fear, hope, defiance. Each sentiment fueled her resolve. "Eve," Jacob's mother finally replied, the resignation evident in her tone. "Perhaps we are at an impasse." Eve felt a pang of sadness at that acknowledgement. The absence of shared understanding loomed heavy. "Do you want me to deny who I am?" The question hung, sparking a flicker of recognition in Jacob's mother's eyes. "It's heartbreaking to consider, but I cannot change my views overnight either. I hope you understand." Eve felt the bittersweet mixture of disappointment and relief swirl within her. She had stood her ground, explored the depths of her emotions, and revealed her truth, not just to Jacob's mother but to herself. Walking away would not mean entirely severing ties. It might just mean they both needed time to grow in different directions. As Jacob's mother retreated into the crowd, a weight lifted from Eve's shoulders. She had taken a significant step, not just toward her art, but toward authentic self-acknowledgement. Challenged now to weave this newfound strength into her life, Eve felt an insatiable need for creation roaring within her. Ideas began forming, clamoring for expression on canvas. As the shadows she had battled faded into the background, where would she take this momentum? The gallery had been a spark, a flicker of acknowledgement. It was time to transform that fire into a blaze of creative output. As she turned back into the space, the murmurs of admiration lingered, reminding her of the promise of success that beckoned ahead. But she knew the stakes would continue rising on all fronts. What awaited her in that ever-developing relationship with her art? And how would she continue to confront her past while pursuing her identity? The canvas of her life remained a vast, unmarked terrain, ripe for exploration and filled with uncertainty. As Eve stepped back into the heart of the gallery, a realization struck her. It wouldn't merely be her past she had to confront. It was also the vibrant future that stood on the horizon, filled with potential and peril alike. With each brushstroke, she would not just create art but perhaps redefine herself entirely. What risks would she take next? Eve's feet carried her across the gallery, as if guided by an unseen force, her senses heightened by the previous conversation. The walls adorned with splashes of color began to vibrate with an energy she had never felt before, an electric current of possibility. She could sense the judgments of others, but their weight had diminished. Each artwork whispered stories of the creators who dared to confront themselves. For the first time she felt included among them, not merely as an observer but as a participant, in the act of creation and in life itself. She approached an empty canvas that stood in the corner, observing its stark whiteness, not as a blank slate, but as an invitation to express a world only she inhabited. The emotions from her conversation with Jacob's mother cascaded through her thoughts. It was time to blend them with the colors she longed to unleash. "Art is my truth," she reminded herself as she picked up a brush, its handle cool and firm in her grip. Each stroke would be a testament to her journey, a declaration to the world that she was not only living but thriving beyond expectations. As she began, her instincts took over. She surrendered to the rhythm of creation, the way colors twisted and turned beneath her brush, becoming more alive than they had ever been in her mind. Forms emerged, twisting vines and blossoming flowers that spiraled outward, fighting through barriers just as she had done. The canvas became a canvas of resilience. With each passing moment, a clarity dawned. Art had never been the enemy. It had been her salvation, a vessel for exploration beyond fear and obligation. Her hesitations melted away, replaced with determination. What had she held back all these years? What parts of herself had she refused to paint into existence? Vibrations of excitement coursed through her veins. This was no longer just about defying Jacob's mother's expectations. It was about her awakening, an exploration of everything she could be. What had felt like a painful confrontation had turned into an empowering catalyst for her creativity. Suddenly, the gallery doors swung open, inviting a gust of fresh air, and a group of patrons who burst in, laughter and chatter echoing against walls vibrant with color. Eve's heart raced at the thought of exhibition, of unveiling her rawest self to others. The anxiety of judgment began to creep back, but she shook it off, recalling her conversation. She would not allow it to dictate her journey any longer. "Excuse me," a voice approached from behind. Eve turned to see a woman, her eyes bright with curiosity. "I couldn't help but notice your work. It's incredible. It feels alive. What inspired you?" The question hung in the air, an offer to unravel her truth. For a moment she paused, knowing that she stood at a crossroads. Would she speak only of her artistic inspirations, or would she let slip the layers of personal discovery wrapped around each stroke? "I just had a conversation that changed everything for me," Eve said finally. "I realized how important it is to create what speaks to me, rather than what is expected." The woman nodded attentively, her interest unmistakable. "That's profound. Have you considered showcasing more of what you're passionate about? There's a gallery downtown actively looking for fresh perspectives. They might even help propel your art into a larger audience." Hope surged within Eve, mingled with apprehension. The thought of showcasing her work felt like a leap from her previous life into an unknown, thrilling chasm. Could she really take such a step after what had transpired? The stakes were high, but so was the potential for growth. "Thank you," Eve replied, her voice steadying with conviction. "I will look into it." As the woman walked away, her words resonated deeply. This was not just about loose brushstrokes or spontaneous bursts of inspiration. This was a pivotal moment. Potential lay before her like a vast ocean, and the real challenge was not the leap into the unknown but resisting the pull of hesitation. Eve stared at her canvas, a tapestry of her truth unfolding before her. Yet, a new question loomed large. Could she face the possibility of failure in this new venture? Her creative spirit ignited. She turned to the second canvas waiting beside her. The exhilarating challenge ahead matched the unsettling dread in her gut. What awaited her beyond this moment? She needed to decide, and soon. How could she embrace the future while still processing a fragmented past? The next brushstroke would demand more than just skill. It required her unwavering determination. What if this time, she dared to express herself completely, unfiltered, for all to see? Eve stood in front of the blank canvas, her heart thumping with uncertainty and anticipation. This was not just about painting. It was a confrontation with her own limitations, the fears that had held her in a self-imposed prison for far too long. The vibrant colors still clung to her fingers from her previous creation, whispering a promise of freedom. She needed to silence those nagging doubts and embrace the unknown that lay ahead. Gazing at the untouched surface, the stark whiteness represented a myriad of possibilities, much like her life that was unfolding unexpectedly. She imagined the gallery downtown, envisioned the patrons who would gaze upon her creations, searching for authenticity. Would they see the intricacies woven into each brushstroke, the raw emotions that formed beneath the surface? Or would they reduce her work to mere aesthetic appeal, stripped of its emotional depth? A tremor of anxiety coursed through her, a familiar visitor that had long overstayed its welcome. "Focus," she murmured to herself, shaking off the apprehension like water from her skin. She retrieved her brushes with a renewed resolve and prepared to translate her journey into art, her journey through heartbreak, through self-doubt, and into a newfound strength. With the first stroke, a dark hue spread across the canvas like a veil being drawn back. It signified the shadows of her past, the emotional struggles that intertwined with every new step she took. But alongside it, she layered a bright splash of yellow, symbolizing hope and optimism, the light flickering in the distance, from her past conversations, from the woman's encouraging words. She had the power to forge her path, to take ownership of her narrative. As the colors danced together, her confidence began to build. She remembered her conversation with Jacob's mother, a moment that inspired her to confront the expectations she had allowed others to impose on her. That day had not just ignited her artistic spirit, it had illuminated the parts of her identity she had neglected. And now, the vivid representations emerging on the canvas were her declaration of defiance against past insecurities. Eve lost herself in the process, each stroke liberating, unveiling layers of fear she faced in being vulnerable. She wanted the world to see her, not just as an artist, but as a human being who suffered, who grew, who breathed creativity into every corner of her existence. She reached for brighter colors, layering in reds and blues, symbols of passion and depth. Suddenly, the blank canvas morphed into a vibrant maelstrom, an explosion of energy that resonated with her innermost self. But as she stepped back to admire her work, a cascade of doubt whispered in her mind. What if she failed? What if her efforts fell flat, and the gallery closed its doors to her? A pit formed in her stomach as she remembered past exhibitions, how her work had been met with distant admiration but little connection or understanding. Would this time be different? The stakes felt insurmountable. The thought was paralyzing, but beneath the weight of that fear lay a simmering resolve. Each doubt, if faced directly, could be transformed into fuel, rather than defeat. She thought about the woman's suggestion once more, the opportunity to showcase her story, her truth. Eve had to make a choice, to retreat into familiar insecurity, or leap forward into possibility. Resolutely she took a deep breath, inhaling the hues of her canvas, letting the courage seep deep into her veins. After all, wasn't this what she had been working toward? The risk was necessary. Walking away now would mean returning to the shadows of complacency, something she had fought to escape. Eve leaned toward the canvas once again, brush in hand, ready to execute her vision. Just as she dipped the bristles into the paint, a familiar voice echoed from the entrance of the gallery. "Are you ready for this?" The sudden disruption sparked a mix of frustration and intrigue. She turned slowly to see Jacob standing there, his expression unreadable. In that moment, myriad emotions exploded within her. Would he support her as she stepped closer to the precipice of new opportunities, or would his presence trigger an avalanche of self-doubt once more? As she locked eyes with Jacob, the next pivotal stroke awaited her, beckoning for completion in the face of uncertainty and challenge. Would she succumb to the ghosts of her past, or would she find the courage to embrace the journey ahead, one brushstroke at a time? The weight of her decision hung precariously above her like an unshed tear. Eve's heart raced as she met Jacob's gaze. The warmth he usually drew from her felt distant, replaced by the familiar pull of anxiety and uncertainty. "Are you ready for this?" he prompted again, his tone a mix of concern and anticipation, a reflection of her turbulent inner world. Still clutching her paintbrush, a weapon against self-doubt, Eve's mind roiled with questions. Was she truly prepared to unveil her work to both Jacob and the world? How could she demonstrate her progress, her growth, when shadows from her past still loomed? The weight of expectation pressed against her, leaving her momentarily speechless. She started, her voice faltering, grappling with the enormity of what came next. Jacob's presence subtly reminded her of losses past, of moments when her art had been overshadowed by personal turmoil. She fought against the urge to retreat, knowing that the only way to break through this moment was to reclaim her narrative. Choosing her words carefully, she replied, "I'm trying to be ready. It's just—" She hesitated, searching for the courage to frame her vulnerabilities into words. Every brushstroke feels like a fight against the fear of judgment. What if all this work falls flat? Jacob stepped closer, his eyes softening as he acknowledged her trepidation. "It won't fall flat unless you let fear dictate your process," he stated, a firm reminder that perhaps this moment wasn't just about creation, but also about confronting her past head-on. "Eve, people often connect more deeply with art that's raw and honest, not just aesthetically pleasing. Show them who you are. They'll value that." His support tangled with her self-doubt, causing a whirlpool of emotions. Could she truly allow herself to be seen? That vulnerable, flawed person behind each stroke of color? With a slow breath, Eve's resolve hardened. It was time to confront not just Jacob's expectations, but her own relentless inner critic. "Let's finish this," she declared, a newfound fire igniting within her spirit. Retreating into doubt was no longer an option. It was time to dance with the inherent risks of authenticity. She glanced back at her canvas. The passionate reds and vibrant yellows swirling in chaotic harmony awaited her. Each color represented a moment of her journey, encapsulating not just the pain, but also the resilience that arose from it. The shadows still lingered, but now they were part of the tapestry rather than the whole picture. As she dipped her brush into colors that radiated hope and uncertainty alike, Eve felt the room shift. The energy filled her, igniting creativity she thought had been lost. Stroke after stroke, she began to realize that this wasn't merely a painting. It was her story, a reclamation of her identity as an artist and a person, a story ripe for sharing. Hours slipped by unnoticed as Eve poured her soul into the canvas, until Jacob's voice broke through her focused state again. "You need to take a break. Look at what you've created." She stepped back, surprise rushing through her as she took in the vibrant work before her. There was a depth she had not seen coming. Perhaps this reconciliation with her fears was not just necessary. It was an evolution of her artistry. The colors erupted with emotion anchored by the shadows that once threatened to drown them. But Eve also sensed an unsettling undercurrent. What if Jacob's support was conditional? What if he wanted her to succeed, but only on his terms? The lingering doubts staked their claim. She worried about how the gallery's patrons would respond, how they'd ever come to understand the emotions interjected onto the canvas. I can't help feeling it isn't enough. What if they see my work as naive?" she murmured, almost to herself. Jacob's face tightened, frustration evident as he shifted closer. "Then it's their loss, Eve. You deserve to be seen. You have the power to break through. Don't let anyone take that away." The surge of emotion that followed was a mix of gratitude and fear. There was a part of her that still needed to prove herself, to shake off the past failures woven into her identity. As Jacob continued to express his encouragement, she felt an inner shift, but uncertainty still hung heavy. She longed for validation that her pain could be more than a history. It could be a foundation for something greater. With a final glance at her burgeoning masterpiece, Eve understood the stakes. This wasn't just about the gallery anymore, but about who she had become through every stroke. The world, and Jacob, would see her light against the darkness. But just before she could fully embrace this new perspective, a message buzzed on her phone. The screen flashed a name she thought she had long forgotten, a blast from the past that could change everything. Eve felt her breath hitch, a mixture of hope and dread flooding her veins. What lay beyond this message might shatter her newfound resolve, or propel her into the next stage of her transformation. She had to know. Would she face it boldly, or shrink back into old patterns? A decision loomed, and with it the potential for deeper revelation awaited. Eve's fingers trembled over her phone, the weight of the unexpected message flickering like a distant star in her periphery. The moment felt surreal, straddling the line between haunting nostalgia and the thrilling potential of new beginnings. With resolve blooming from the depths of her artistic journey, she opened the message. It was from an old mentor, an artist she had admired and leaned on for guidance before Jacob's passing. "Hey Eve, I've seen your recent work and I must say I'm impressed. I'd love to catch up and discuss an opportunity I think could interest you. Are you free this week?" Eve stared at the screen, a whirlwind of conflicting emotions cascading through her. Could this be the opportunity she always hoped for? The chance to traverse beyond self-imposed confines? The hope rekindled, echoing Clara's earlier encouragement about pursuing more significant displays of her talent, igniting a flicker of determination within her. She felt empowered, recalling the vibrant colors she had poured into the canvas just moments ago. Each stroke was a testimony of her journey, reflecting her resilience and authenticity. Each moment a brush with uncertainty she had bravely faced. "I am free," she typed, her heart thumping defiantly against her ribcage. "Let's meet." With the message sent, Eve returned her focus to the canvas before her, as if it were a portal to her newfound voice. The vibrant colors now seemed to dance and pulse with a life of their own, revealing narratives that extended beyond mere aesthetics. Every brushstroke told a story of rebirth, of emerging from darkness with the strength of newfound self-acceptance. As the hours flowed into the night, a profound sense of purpose enveloped her. A realization that she no longer needed to dwell in the shadows of her past, but could instead stand firmly in her own light. The doubts about her worth began to dissipate, finding reprieve in the freedom of artistic expression. No longer tied down by the resonance of Jacob's family's expectations, she felt light, liberated. Yet, as her confidence surged, she sensed an undercurrent of potential conflict looming with her late husband's family. They had always relied upon her grief, seeking to tether her story to theirs, but she was ready to reshape that narrative. In this transformative moment, Eve understood that her growth was not just about artistry. It was as much about crafting a space to exist on her own terms, free from the shadows of their perceptions. Days passed swiftly, and soon it was the evening of the downtown gallery event. Dressed in a simple yet elegant outfit, she stepped into the bustling venue, her heart a tumultuous mix of excitement and anxiety. The anticipation hung in the air like the scent of fresh paint. Each new face she encountered was an opportunity for connection and understanding. Each interaction was a step into her new truth. When she entered the gallery, the familiar faces of critics and admirers filled the space. They were gathered around her vibrant pieces, murmuring words of intrigue, addressing the very emotions she had poured into every canvas. For the first time, she felt seen, not as Jacob's widow, but as Eve, the artist shaping her own destiny. As the evening unfolded, Eve found herself amidst animated conversations, her art igniting connections and dialogues she never imagined. Patrons who once stood skeptical transformed into profound supporters, their words a balm for her insecurities. Suddenly, she spotted Jacob's mother across the room, her expression a whirlwind of curiosity and unease as she followed the flow of admiration directed at Eve's work. A flicker of resolve ignited within Eve, prompting her to walk gracefully toward her. This feels like the moment she needed to solidify her reclamation of self. Eve, Jacob's mother began, attempting to mask her surprise. Your work, it draws people in. With unwavering confidence, Eve replied, Thank you. Every piece represents my journey, my reclaiming of happiness, fully embracing both my joy and my grief. I've taken back my narrative. Jacob's mother nodded, a hint of understanding brightening her expression. A moment of reconciliation rippled through the tension between them. I wish I could understand better. It's difficult to let go of preconceived notions. Perhaps it's time we both let go, Mom, Eve said softly. We're allowed to grow in different directions. What laid between them was not merely the weight of judgment, but the acknowledgement of their shared experience of love and loss. In that moment of validation, Eve felt free. She no longer needed their approval or their past to define her present. Instead, she could welcome the future, layered with performance and possibility. The crescendo of conversation faded, allowing her voice to echo in her own heart. The gallery had become a crucible of transformation, not only for her art, but for her life. True recognition dawned as each moment unfurled, validation of her worth as an artist, and as Eve, a woman confident in her identity. And at that pivotal moment, she understood that personal fulfillment wasn't simply about achieving external accolades or navigating relationships. It was driven by the internal harmony she had fiercely fought for, while fighting her battles against grief. Eve stepped back into the crowd, exuding new energy, a potent mix of clarity and acceptance. She had conquered doubt, proven her resilience, and had finally embraced not just her artistry, but her capacity to thrive. As she mingled amongst guests, she felt every exchange of admiration, every connection drawn toward her. A solid affirmation that she was on a journey of transformation, no longer hindered by expectations, but liberated by authenticity. It was in this intricate dance of individuality and connection that Eve Thompson had forged her new narrative. The promise of an upcoming exhibition, a rising career, and most importantly, the unveiling of her truest self. This concluding chapter had not only retraced her steps through grief and rediscovery, but illuminated her path toward a radiant future, all painted in vibrant hues of growth and courage. Eve had become not just an artist, but a woman renewed, capable of achieving the profound success she had once deemed elusive. confident in her right to create, to share, and to simply be. Now is the moment to step into your own journey and embrace your transformation. Don't wait even one more second. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about Eve's incredible transformation. And please, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. True fans of personal overcoming stories know the importance of standing together in support.